If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, hour number 2, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for being with us today. That's hour number 2. The telephone number, 870-275-9799. If you want to contribute to the program, you can also head over to facebook.com/Conduit News and check things out. Also, news story up at conduitnews.com. Check it out. Scare tactics don't be Kansas. You're gonna definitely want to read that today. Hey, folks, welcome to the program. I want to introduce you to a professor, crop and soil and environmental sciences from the University of Arkansas. His name is Jason Norsworthy. Jason, thanks for coming on the program this morning.
Great to be with you, Paul.
Okay, I wanted to have you on because I have done some interviews about dicamba, plant board, things like that, and I'm at this point kind of unclear. I would just like for you've actually done a lot of research into dicamba, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So, I mean, what can you tell us about it? What is dicamba, and what did you find? Is it a volatile product? Can you tell us what volatility actually means in the agricultural community?
Well, let me start by telling you a little bit about dicamba. Dicamba is a herbicide that's been around for now approximately 50 years. It's a herbicide that we have routinely used very early in the year. We use it typically in March, maybe even early April, for what we call a burn-down herbicide. Conditions during application are relatively cool. We never have used it late in the year. I would say June, July. It is not a herbicide that has been typically used within crops. It has a registration in corn and grain sorghum, so individuals could say, yes, it has been used there, but typically there it would be a May application. And then also the rates that we apply it in corn and grain sorghum are much lower than the rates that we're now using in these dicamba crops, these extend crops as individuals refer to them. Okay. And you mentioned the word volatility, and I think that's really the crux of where we get at this. When you take a herbicide such as dicamba that has a volatile component to it, and you begin to spray it on during warm days, or maybe it's even a warm day a few days after the application itself. At that point, the herbicide begins to gas off, and the applicator has no control of where that herbicide is going to move.
Okay, so you said that the one thing that I didn't know. For 50 years, this has been around?
Yeah, this herbicide, I think, was discovered in the early 60s, commercialized in the late 60s. So we have used this herbicide, and I contend we've used it with a great deal of success. We just have not used it at the time of year that we are trying to apply it today in these dicamba crops.
Okay, so why the change all of a sudden? I mean, if it's been around for 50 years, why? When was there a consensus, or did people just start to use it in warmer years? Is there a history here that we need to know?
Absolutely. So I think, if I were to mention Roundup Ready crops, I think anyone that's somewhat familiar with agriculture understands Roundup Ready crops. In 1996, Roundup Ready soybean came onto the market, and prior to that, we could not spray Roundup over the top of soybeans. And a similar situation has occurred with dicamba. In 2015, Cotton was registered. The dicamba products were not registered. 16, we had soybean that came on the market. And in 2017, the EPA allowed dicamba to be used on these, quote, dicamba crops, these ones that have a trait or gene inserted to them that allows for resistance to the herbicide dicamba. And with that, growers began to use dicamba to try to control pigweed, which is the number one weed in cotton as well as in soybeans in the state of Arkansas.
Okay, so they were not using dicamba on cotton before that time?
That is correct. Dicamba kills cotton. Dicamba kills soybean. Actually, soybean is one of the most sensitive plants that exist in the environment today, or in our communities today. It's one of the most sensitive plants to dicamba.
Okay, so as a scientist, a crop and soil, tell us about your research in terms of, I know it's been around for 50 years, but I know you have been doing a lot of research on this because of this issue of volatility, correct?
No, that is correct. Again, there really wasn't a lot of concern with volatility. Volatility is a function of temperature. As temperature increases, volatilization, or the ability of a herbicide to gas off like dicamba, increases, and actually can increase quite substantially as a result of high temps. And I come back, we really had no issues as long as we were using this in March and April under these cooler conditions. It did not seem to convert over to a gas and cause any major issues. Also, you might also just remember, in April, we don't have a lot of soybeans that are up at that time of year. But once we move this over into June and July, these applications, what we have found is that under the environmental conditions that we have here in Arkansas, it does convert to a gas. And at that point, what we have found the last several years is that a high percentage of the damage that we're seeing in these fields appears to be a function of volatility. And with that, when you spray hundreds of thousands of acres of a product like dicamba that has a volatile component to it over a short period of time, which in northeast Arkansas there's been a lot of spraying to control pigweed, and rightfully so. Pigweed is a major issue there. But when that happens, you begin to load the atmosphere with this gas, and we begin to observe landscape damage. And it's not only damage that we're seeing on soybean, but we're also seeing damage on a lot of sensitive trees across the landscape. I know sycamore appears to have a high degree of sensitivity. Cypress trees, there are certain oak trees that are damaged. And so with that, then you begin to ask yourself, what is the long-term consequences of this when you begin to have landscape damage?
Let me ask you this. Again, we're talking with Jason Norsworthy, a professor of crop and soil and environmental science with the University of Arkansas. Is it possible to apply this stuff in the summer months and it not be so volatile? Is that a possibility?
I think it's going to be very challenging when you say summer months. I think that there is some potential to use it very early in crops. We continue to move our planting dates further and further up each year, and we'll plant soybeans even northeast Arkansas as early as mid-April, weather contingent. We'll plant cotton last week of April, and I think there is some potential to use it as what we call a pre-emergence herbicide, maybe at the time of planting, or if we can get our crops planted early enough, maybe we can even get one post-emergence application in the crop, come over the top of the crop once it emerges. But that has got to be very early in the growing season. You take a look at the data and the complaints that have occurred in Arkansas from dicamba. There was over 1,000 complaints in 2017, and I think there was 200 complaints this past year. But when we look at the data, those complaints are occurring. Really, they're occurring in mid to late June, early July, and the symptomology from dicamba, the injury shows up about 14 to 21 days after you spray. So what that tells us is that, no, you're not going to be able to go out there and make a June application and keep this material in the field because, again, the research indicates that it's volatilizing and begins to move in multiple directions.
But backing up, so 50 years, it's been around for 50 years. Is there something about it specifically that it really works well? I mean, volatility aside, does it work better than other other chemicals like that are on the market?
Yeah, yes, it's a very good product. Again, it's a product that we've used in Arkansas. Early 2000s, we began to document a weed that we call glyphosate-resistant mare's tail, or horseweed is what some individuals may call it. And at that point, we began to really incorporate it into our burn-down weed control programs because glyphosate or Roundup is no longer working. And this herbicide provided a great tool for us in terms of controlling a weed that we needed to clean out of the fields prior to planting. So it has some strong use there. And I'll tell you, it has very good activity on Palmer amaranth, or pigweed, as the growers call it in crop. But the question really begins again to center around volatility. There's a risk and reward associated with applications, and there's not a lot of risk with these extremely early season applications, but as we move later and later in the year, that risk increases substantially.
It's fascinating. It is absolutely a fascinating issue to me, and I want to continue to report on it and kind of track what happens with all of this. And I appreciate your research, and I appreciate, Jason, you coming on the program and telling us about this, because I think a lot of people out there, are not farmers. Most of us aren't. And this is a big deal because, it's a big industry here in the state. So I really appreciate you coming on, Jason Norsworthy.
Well, no, I appreciate you, Paul. Thanks a lot.
All righty. All right. Have a great day. Folks, we're going to take a break. The telephone number, 870-275-9799. Coming up, we'll be talking with Rabbi Ari Spiro, about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and what she said comparing the Holocaust to the caravan. Back in just a moment.
Engaged in this scheme to illegally bill the state of Arkansas Medicaid program, and it's really a sad state of affairs when you got
and how much of that money that goes from the taxpayer to them, do they turn around and use it to pay off legislators or to give them money so that they will ensure more taxpayer dollars? Basically, you can't use taxpayer money to even if it wasn't a bribe and you're saying, well, we're just lobbying people. You can't do that. You can't use taxpayer money to then lobby, for more taxpayer money. But that seems to be what they were doing for a long time.
Yeah, influence peddling.
It's
right. Just take it, and then they had this general improvement fund money. They had a scheme. They created phony invoices for work never performed, excessive reimbursement for vehicles for several of the directors.
Let's face it, times are
preferred
tough for the Arkansas
family.
General Assembly. They're all waiting for the spotlight exposing public corruption to end, so they won't be under so much scrutiny. And during this time, what if you're a legislator and you need money? What if you're slapped with a huge expense? What if your check for consultant services is late this month? Or maybe you just need extra cash now until payday. When that happens, you can't wait. Hi, I'm Bobby Blackmail for the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank, your trusted source to over 135 lenders to get you short-term cash fast. Use the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank today, and you can have up to $12,500 cash in your checking account tomorrow. Dried-up bribes no longer coming from Medicaid entities? Handled. Extra cash until your hopeful acquittal? Done. And you'll be surprised at how easy it is to get extra cash. Just Be an elected official and be comfortable with the status quo, and we'll connect you with a fellow legislator who is ready to loan. It's quick and easy. And don't worry if you can't make the payments, because the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank is designed to help you get through these tough economic times. There are other ways you can pay off your debt, like by voting the way the establishment wants, or by rewarding some with committee chairmanships. So forget about overdraft fees and the spirit of covetousness that sometimes overwhelms the best of lawmakers. Just remember, the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank for short-term cash between colleagues when you need it fast.
Some transactions have long-term consequences.
Paul Harrell, parody.
Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, so scare tactics. Scare Tactics. That's right. Not the TV show with Tracy Morgan. Oh, by the way, so has anybody ever seen that Christmas movie, The Star? It's a cartoon. Man, is it good. Man, it's about the donkey that's there when Jesus is born. But it's pretty fantastic. Like, it's like a spoiler alert. Like, it's like whole time the donkey dreams of getting to ride into town with the royal caravan with the other horses, but through a series of events he ends up being part of the most important royal caravan of all time. It's amazing. It's a great story. You should check it out. It's really, really good. And the characters are good, and there's just like a ton. I was amazed. And I was talking to my wife the other day. As Christians, sometimes you'll watch something and then it gets to, and everything's going okay, but then gets to this point where it's like, and there's the agenda, right? There was never anything like that. They really stuck to the biblical story, aside from the fact that they're, they're making up a story, of about what happened to the donkey, and, that was with Mary and Joseph and everything. But I just found it really, really sound and fun, and just a great way to teach about the king. And that was the other thing. They talked about the arrival of a king, and a lot of times I think we forget that that's what Christmas is about, is King Jesus being born. Okay, so scare tactics. The reason I mentioned Tracy Morgan is because he voices the camel. Okay, bringing this full circle. He voices one of the camels that one of the wise men ride into town on. And anyway, sorry about that. So let's pick up with this article here. There is argument that's being advanced. It's like a warning to Republican legislators who are thinking about tax cuts and things like that, and they want to make sure that Arkansas doesn't become Kansas. And that's essentially, let's just read it here. Incoming Senate President Pro Temp Jim Hendren, the governor's nephew, bragged on the work of his task force, which is proposing a reduction in the top income tax rate. In explaining why the proposed tax cuts are not larger, Hendren told Talk Business and Politics the task force was very aware of the budget problems that occurred both in Kansas and Oklahoma when they adopted large tax cuts. Afterward, those states experienced budget problems. Now, first, one of the reasons Oklahoma experienced problems is because oil prices tanked. Okay, so that was unforeseen. And then Kansas didn't get spending under control. But anyway, I digress. Article goes on. Why is Hendren pointing to two states that tried such huge tax cuts? No one in Arkansas is talking about similar deep cuts. Don't be Kansas is a diversion to take away attention from the real issue. Every 2 years, the Arkansas legislature passes some tax cut, but before the legislative session is over, manages to pass new taxes or broadens the application of existing taxes so that Arkansas always remains one of the worst tax states in the nation. By citing the extreme cuts tied in Kansas and Oklahoma, Senator Hendren also diverts attention from the fact that Arkansas government costs more per person than state government does in most states, and specifically Oklahoma. What are we? We're almost $8,000 a person to run our government. Oklahoma's sitting at $5,000 a person. In working toward lower taxes, we don't need to be Kansas, and we don't even need to talk about cuts in services. Much could be accomplished just by avoiding wasteful spending. Over the last few years, we've seen millions of dollars spent on computer systems that didn't work, and which ended up costing twice as much. We've seen the governor insist on awarding a huge contract to the highest bidder. We've seen an increase in discretionary spending and an increase in giving away money to corporations. The governor even gave away tax money to private colleges. Bad enough giving away money to private colleges, but one college was also a financially mismanaged college. Why are we giving the governor so many millions of dollars to pick winners and losers in business when most Arkansas businesses and families struggle to pay the already high cost of Arkansas's bloated government? That is an excellent question, and it really is a nonpartisan one if you think about it. Do you remember when we gave money, and I say we, but I'm meaning the governor, to the Taekwondo Association because we wanted them to build a dojo? This goes on. The legislature has been unwilling to systematically evaluate state programs for performance. Special interests don't want that to happen. If the legislature fails to do the work to evaluate spending, then we will continue to get little more than tax shifting from one tax to another and continued high tax burdens for our Kansans. Using the mantra, "Don't be Kansas," is a way to avoid discussing how to reverse Arkansas's downward spiral to being the 46th worst state in the nation. Even after Kansas restored some taxes to raise revenues, Kansas's tax structure is still far superior to Arkansas's. Kansas is 28th in the nation. Oklahoma ranks as the 26th best tax state. The people of Kansas and Oklahoma are probably looking at Arkansas and saying, "Don't be Arkansas." Arkansas isn't even moving in the right direction, having gone from 43rd to 46th as far as the worst tax state in the nation. Instead of using scare tactics to keep Arkansas a high-tax state, Arkansas politicians should have used the past year of tax studies to come up with a plan on how to at least move the needle the other way, towards a lower overall tax burden and away from excessive spending. By the way, Senator Hendren didn't mention the tax increases already being discussed for highways that would wipe out all the tax relief provided from an income tax rate change, and that would actually increase the overall tax burden, plus a tax on your out-of-state internet purchases. Are you tired of Arkansas cutting one tax just to raise another, or broadening another so that Arkansas keeps taking more of your money? One thing is certain. If we stay silent and you allow the tax shifting game to continue, heavier tax burdens are on the way. You see the sources at the bottom there, courtesy of Conduit for Action. Story up right now, scare tactics, don't be Kansas, up at conduitnews.com. When you go there to share this story with your friends, support Conduit News by clicking on store and buying your Marble Palace mug or Conduit News t-shirt or other mugs. Do that today. They make for great Christmas presents. We will see you on the other side of this break.
Hell, illusory management contracts. I mean, it was a well-oiled scheme. They had all the pieces in play, and that's why, the two purposes in this lawsuit: full and fair accountability for taxpayer dollars, and also more transparency. We're happy to work with the federal government. We know that they're busy at work on this, but we want this information. We want a spotlight on this information. We want transparency, and figure out and get the taxpayer dollars back for the citizens of Arkansas.
Yeah. Is there any? Do you think is there anybody in the government of the state of Arkansas that you would that would agree with this goal, that also wants to get this money, see this money returned to the taxpayers?
I would think so. We've heard, of course, we've heard the same song and dance in the Ecclesia matter. We filed suit, an illegal exaction suit in the Ecclesia matter. We heard that the Attorney General wanted to do that. Yet the Attorney General, at the same time, we had asked to take depositions, for example, of a couple of legislators, Representative Dodson, Representative Collins, and the Attorney General filed a motion to block our deposition. And so how can you want taxpayer dollars back on one hand, and then on the other hand, you're blocking a civil lawsuit from taking depositions, calling legislative privilege?
Yeah, tell me about that, because that's what the Attorney General argued, was that legislative privilege. What is the definition of legislative privilege when it comes to this type of situation?
Well, under certain situations, there's privilege where that legislators can assert where they don't have to be subject to a deposition. For example, things that happen on the House floor. The law is unclear now, and that Fayetteville case, there's a case up at the Supreme Court now that we're probably going to get a ruling, so we may have an answer to that question. But recently, the Circuit Court ruled that in the Ecclesia matter that these representatives would not have to, we could not depose them. Although in Ecclesia, they also filed.
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
It's crazy. It seems like it was 10 days ago, but it doesn't seem like it's 10 days ago, but I guess it pretty much was. The media been telling us for a while the caravan south of the border doesn't exist. And then, of course, it did exist, because then they had all the stories of the tear gas that was used. And can you believe that Trump would because nobody's ever done it. That's not true, obviously. Other presidents have had to use tear gas at the border before. And that prompted the socialist Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She compared the migrant caravan to Jews fleeing the Holocaust. Can you believe this? Hundreds tried to storm the border. And this was, I couldn't believe it when this happened. That, here's her tweet. Asking to be considered a refugee and applying for status isn't a crime. It wasn't for Jewish families fleeing Germany. It wasn't for targeted families fleeing Rwanda. It wasn't for communities fleeing war-torn Syria, and it isn't for those fleeing violence in Central America. So there we go. We have the comparison of the Holocaust there. So I wanted to bring in Rabbi Ari Spiro joins us. Of course, he is the author of the book Push Back, Reclaiming the American Judeo-Christian Spirit. Rabbi Spiro, welcome back to the program, sir.
Well, thank you very much.
What was your reaction when you heard this?
Well, my reaction was, it's like you say, what do you call her? Ocasio? I like that. But this is more than just her typical Ocasio. This is really obscene. They're exploiting the Holocaust for their leftist goals. They want open borders because they can do what they want with elections that way. Once these people get into the country, even though they're illegal, we have two things that happen. Either one, you have places like California that say that illegals can vote, or you have other places that say, well, illegals can't vote, but they somehow make sure that they vote anyways. And so they're just going to win every election, and they'll transform America into the socialist state that they want, with a ruling class being the ones who will control America, and we, the middle class, paying the taxes for all of the freebies that the illegal immigrants will have, that the American taxpayer himself does not have. But it's obscene because the Jewish people, during the time of the Holocaust, they were hunted down by the Gestapo. They were put on trains for torture at concentration camps and killed. Hitler decided a full-scale genocide against the Jewish people to destroy them. Every Jewish family was set upon for destruction. We're here. No one in Honduras is going after all of these families and saying we're going to kill you, make you extinct. No one's doing that. No one's rounding them up and putting them in concentration camps. They can live in Honduras. They were offered residency in Mexico. The Jews weren't offered residency anywhere. If they stayed in Europe, they were dead. So it's obscene to make this comparison, besides being just wrong. But they do it. The left does this because it works, because nobody wants to have a Holocaust again. People feel guilty about it, and they say, oh, if this is a Holocaust or a shred of a Holocaust, let's not do it, and we'll just open up the border. So that's why they do it, because it works with a lot of people.
And I agree with you about their long-term goals. They want open borders because it eventually will translate, they know, to more votes. And you've heard people say that these elites that are running things, they really do need like a permanent underclass. That's why they don't like the middle class, and so more illegal immigration means lower wages it means a dwindling middle class and everything else. But I'd like to get your opinion on this concept of open borders, because there are a lot of people on the left that, they see these people at the border and they just, their heart breaks and they think that the right is evil. Why wouldn't we let them in? Why wouldn't we help them? And, a lot of it's millennials. And I just think to myself, why is it that the idea of having a border and controlling who comes and who goes, why is that such a politically incorrect thing today? And because it's one of the most foundational things of civilization, period, is that you have borders and you get to distinguish between, who gets to come in, which country you're in, and that sort of thing. So I know that's a really loaded question, but why do you think, especially millennials, are having such a hard time with this?
Well, they have a hard time with it because borders means sovereignty. It means nationhood. It means nationalism. And they're being raised by their left-wing teachers and the left-wing media that nationalism is bad and nationhood is bad, sovereignty is bad, because really if you're a worldwide socialist, a leftist, you don't believe in borders. There's no such thing as nationhood. It's all just one global fraternity. I mean, even a guy like Obama, I don't know that he considers himself a citizen of the United States as much as a citizen of the world. So the whole idea of borders, which means each country is sovereign, that it has laws that govern it, not the United Nations, and not the EU, and not the International Court, and not The Hague. This is against leftist thinking, so they don't like it. As far as letting these immigrants in, I assure you that if the people that wanted to come in were a bunch of evangelical Christians or Likudniks, people from the Likud in Israel, you wouldn't see the left clamoring for all of this immigration entry. Really not. They see these people as future welfare recipients, voting Democrat, transforming the country, all part of this multiculturalism, so they're for it. But I don't see any of them really, none of them stood up. You have a genocide against Christians, biblical Christians, all over Africa and the Middle East. I don't see the left clamoring to bring these people in. And they don't seem to be clamoring to. I can tell you one thing: the few Israelis that were Likud types that wanted to come to America during the Obama administration. Their passports were not recognized for this reason or that. So it's very selective, very, very selective. But you have to have borders because if not, jihadists can come in, criminals, MS-13 gang members, people with diseases, people that are mules for drug lords. Some of the millennials, they're not ideological, they're just shallow. And they just think that, hey, there's no problem. There's no problem with anything. And everything always will work out. And they've been taught that Republicans, conservatives, patriots, Americans are mean. That's all. Listen, I just saw an article where 1/5 of the millennials think that the American flag is a symbol of hate.
Gosh. Yeah.
These are our grandchildren. Look how they've been taught.
I like what you said. We're talking with Rabbi Ari Spiro, political analyst. Again, he's author of the book Pushback, Reclaiming the American Judeo-Christian Spirit. You can get it on Amazon. You know, what you said about, well, borders mean sovereignty. You know, and it dawned on me, and I don't know why it's taken me this long to figure this out, but in the same sense, you know, in America, we have what are supposed to be sovereign states that, you know, have different laws, maybe different ways of doing things. And that sort of is true now, but not nearly the way it was. You know, the bigger federal government has essentially, you know, taken a lot of that sovereignty away from the states by giving our own money back to us with strings attached and making sure that we pass the laws that they want. And that's what the left likes. They like that, and that's how they see the world. And so to me, it just kind of clicked. Okay, well, that's why they don't want us to have sovereign nations. It's the same principle on a much larger scale.
Bingo, very good. They don't want local control. They don't like the idea of states' rights or local control, local school boards, because they themselves want to control everybody's life. Just when I grew up in the 50s, early 50s, it was understood that the greatness of America was local control. People of a given city, community, from the schools to zoning to most laws, marriage, divorce, all of these things, they decided their own fate. But you've got these control freaks, these social engineers out in New York and Washington, and now in certain places in San Francisco and Silicon Valley and L.A. These are control freaks. They want to social engineer every decision of everybody all across this country. The Founding Fathers made a country that was different than other countries. It wasn't ruled by a king or a grand state or socialism. Local control, that was Madison spoke about it. But the liberal control freaks, they want to social engineer every aspect of your life. So that's a very good point. I never thought about it. The same way they're against local control, state rights, they're against national borders, national sovereignty.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely, it just was something that just, you know, all of a sudden I was like, okay, well, yeah, that totally makes sense. That is their vision. It's the same playbook that just continues, you know, to be implemented. Now, thankfully, right now, we have, you know, President Trump, who's in office. We covered last hour, Rabbi Spiro, we were talking about what's going on in France. And the media, if they report on what's going on in France with the yellow vests at all, it's about a high gas tax. But if you kind of dive into it, what I am thinking is it's not just about the high gas tax for climate change. It's about the fact that their entire country has been sold out, and the people aren't being considered. Now, that might be called what you just said, nationalism versus this global citizen of the earth mentality. Now, I tell you this, the media will never report that what's going on in France is standing up for nationalism and against globalism.
No, they won't, because they always tell us to be like Europe, and that's because Europe is socialist. But as soon as the people of Europe rise up and say, we don't want to be pawns, faceless pawns, just put down in the name of globalism and socialism and EU, well, they won't report that because they want the American people to feel that we're somehow queer, we're strange, that we want to have local control, or we don't want to give our life over to the deep state and to the ruling class. And so that's why they're not going to report it. Mm-hmm. No way.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's very interesting to kind of see what's, you know, how things are going to continue to spread. And I do think, you know, from Brexit to the election of Donald Trump, I think we're seeing a lot of a lot of interesting developments. You know, Donald Trump's approval rating is in the high 40s or in the 50s, and he's somehow terrible. But Emmanuel Macron is great, but his approval rating in his own country is like at 22%.
You know, in France and in Germany and even America, there's all the money in the world for every illegal immigrant, as long as they're, you know, if they're Muslim, bring them in. If they're illegals, bring them in. There's no money for the people. You've got to tax the people in France even higher on their gasoline for some concocted environmental thing. So you tax the middle class again, but yet there's all this money for those illegals that they think will vote Democrat or will come in and change the culture in the name of religion or Sharia. For them, there's all the money in the world.
Yeah, and it's quite. There's certainly something that is totally out of balance in terms of, you know, these people that claim that they want, you know, democracy, and yet they really don't want the people to have a say in the affairs because the elites think they can live their lives, you know, better, make the decisions for them. Rabbi Ari Spiro, it's always great to have you on, sir, and I really appreciate you spending time with us this morning.
Well, thank you. I'm now right on Pennsylvania Avenue, going to watch the procession of President Bush on the way to the National Cathedral.
Wow. Is it a pretty somber, reverent environment up there right now?
Well, it is and it isn't. It depends where you go. I was at the Trump Hotel last night, and it wasn't so somber. People pay their respects, but then he lived a nice, long life, and life has to go on. But it's respect for America, the presidency, and what we've done historically. So I've got to go down right now to the street.
All right. Well, Rabbi Spiro, we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Talk to you. Bye-bye.
All righty. Folks, the number 870-275-9799. Yeah, the funeral of 94-year-old George H.W. Bush will take place today, and it has essentially slowed Washington. This funeral has slowed Washington to a crawl, where you have, you know, spending bills and things like that have kind of been put off, and so everybody's kind of stopping right now and paying their respects, you know, to President 41. So we're going to take a break, going to reset, and we'll be back here in just a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Travis Story, who is Senator Bob Ballinger's partner, filed a motion to dismiss that lawsuit. The judge denied that motion to dismiss. We're proceeding on with the lawsuit. Obviously, we think there's a huge conflict of interest there when Travis Story, who is law partners with Senator Bob Ballinger, and Bob Ballinger gave gift money to Ecclesia. So, you know, it's just again, we're trying to bring transparency to the entire matter, get taxpayer dollars back, the whole thing started with regard to Ecclesia College when our client, Jim Parsons, Lieutenant Colonel Jim Parsons, asked for records. And Ecclesia basically thumbed their nose at them.
Yeah.
And said, we're not giving you the records.
Good morning. Good morning. Congratulations, you have made it to the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language, where we strive to offer politicians the very best in ambiguously specific language, the purpose of which is to allow our politician bosses to grow government and keep their constituents in the dark. This yields two beneficial outcomes. First, the government-growing politicians stay in office, and second, we at the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language get to remain in the shadows and get to keep our jobs. Now, it's time for technocrat training drills. Johnny?
Yes?
A politician wants to use the healthcare system to punish those who have and redistribute their wealth. What is the appropriate language to use in this situation to make an unpopular idea acceptable to the public?
I would emphasize that these ideas would make their healthcare more affordable and make sure the public understands if they already have adequate healthcare, nothing will change for them.
Very good, Johnny. Much progress since last time. Next up, let's have Susie. Susie, your politician has been caught in, dare I say it, a lie.
What kind of a lie?
It doesn't really matter, but in the spirit of the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language, I will give you a good hypothetical scenario. Dozens of politicians have been thrown out of office for supporting a socialist healthcare program. So the remaining politicians get together and they pass a bill to, quote, end the program, end quote. But they really want to keep it. What should they do, Susie?
May I ask a question for more information?
Certainly.
Has the word lie been used by the political opposition?
Yes.
I know. They should change the name of the program. Maybe use the word works to make the sheeple think it's for working folk. Then they should go on the attack and get the public distracted. I would advise the politician to publicly question why our political dialogue has become so uncivilized and tell them to claim using the word lie, no matter how accurate, is a personal attack on his or her character. And if they admit to any wrongdoing at all, they must replace the word lie with words like misspoke, misstatement, misrepresent, or mislead.
Amazing! Excellent work, Susie. I feel like the student has really become the teacher. You will make a terrific addition to the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language.
All hands on deck. This is a Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language emergency. Several politicians are scrambling after being exposed by some talk radio host. Let's move it, people. They need our help.
The Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language. You vote 'em in, and we keep 'em in. PHP Parody. Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
So this story, just to kind of give you the spin that is out there about Emmanuel Macron and the French Yellow Vest protesters, they're saying that it's not enough that he caved on the gas tax, okay? I'm talking about French's gas. I'm not talking about the potential Arkansas gas tax. I'm talking about French's, the French's gas tax. They're saying that they want him out altogether now because he's just an elitist and essentially, has essentially said, let them eat cake. Macron became the latest world leader to suffer at home for trying to impose green taxes. This is from the South China Morning Post. President's first major policy U-turn may not quell weeks of protests. Okay, now if you read this, it's interesting. The French government has caved after the worst rioting in decades and delayed an increase in energy taxes, but it was seen as too little too late by many protesters. Now, if it's too little too late, then it's more about than just the gas tax, right? Is it really about a rejection of globalism and the fact that the French people feel like they've been sold out? Demonstrators were back in the streets on Tuesday wearing their signature yellow vest. They blocked several fuel depots. And on a highway near the southern city of some French name I'm not going to try to pronounce, They commandeered a toll booth to let motorists pass for free near a sign reading Macron dictator. Okay. Last weekend, more than 130 people were injured. 412 were arrested in the rioting at the French capital. Shops were looted. Cars were torched in plush neighborhoods around the, around famed landmarks. Let's see here. 4 people have been killed, officials said, and more protests are planned for this weekend. One unifying complaint among the leaderless protesters who come from across the political and social spectrum has been the anger at Macron and the perceived elitism of France's aloof ruling class. France has never been here before. Since returning from the G20 summit in Argentina, Macron has either remained in his palace residence or else shied away from speaking publicly about the protests that have created his biggest political crisis since taking office last May. It was Prime Minister Edouard Philippe who announced a 6-month delay in the fuel tax increase that was to begin in January. Just 3 weeks ago, Philippe has insisted that the government would be steadfast in its tax plans. That obviously is not true. The government has made a U-turn to appease the protesters who wear the yellow vests that France requires motorists to have in their vehicles in case of roadside emergencies. Now, that's another angle of the yellow vest, that they're required to have them in their car in case of a roadside emergency. So it's like, just leave us alone. And so they're wearing the yellow vests, ironically. And in a way, they gave their own government gave them. I was wondering, where are they getting the yellow vests from? So it's just kind of like in a way, it's just like a giant middle finger to their own government. Make sure you put your vest on before you go out and protest. Mother government is here. Anyway, it keeps going about U.S. President Donald Trump. He said on Tuesday that Macron's retreat vindicated his rejection of the 2015 Paris climate agreements, which has sent the media, their heads are exploding, and he's exactly right, though. He's exactly right, because the gas tax was about climate change, and President Donald Trump is saying, see, I knew that I was wrong about the Paris Climate Accords. Your own citizens are rejecting you because of this bogus climate change stuff. There's man-made climate change stuff. That has sent the media into a tailspin. They're like, Trump trying to take credit, Trump praising himself, but he's stating the obvious, and he's not letting the short-term memory. He knows that the short-term memory of the public is of the reality, and he is saying, hang on. Remember when I exited out of the Paris Climate Agreement? And he's essentially saying, it kind of sounds like the people of France like me more than they like Macron. It is really fun to watch. Now, then Trump said this. Trump retweeted a false claim from American conservative student activist Charlie Kirk that said, we want Trump being chanted through the streets of Paris. So Charlie Kirk tweeted that there was the slogan, we want Trump, that was being chanted through the streets of Paris. Now, the media is out there in droves saying that's a false claim, that never happened. Can you imagine? Yeah, whether it was true or false. I mean, if it was true, they would definitely tell you it wasn't. Can you imagine if that were true, though? The media would just not report it. Folks, then those protesters would for sure be the enemy of the world in France. Folks, that's all the time we have for today. Go to conduitnews.com, click on store, get your Marble Palace mug.